When and how did you become interested in Nirav Modi and the story?
This would have been around about December 2018 when I was asked to write a piece about Nirav Modi. At that point, he'd been on the run for almost a year. And we started asking, well, this is sort of an interesting story. What's happened to this guy? Where is this guy? And so I wrote a piece at that point, basically asking that question. And doing a sort of a summary of Nirav Modi's career and his extraordinary rise in the world of luxury diamond dealing. And shortly after that piece, I received a tip-off to let me know that Nirav Modi was indeed living in London, and that in fact he started up a new diamond business and was back diamond trading again. We started to investigate this. And we were able to establish that Modi was indeed living in London and that he was indeed dealing in diamonds from London. After some days of actually watching him, and we've been able to establish that he had a fairly fixed routine where he would leave his apartment at Centre Point, which is right in the centre of London, and that he walked the few hundred yards from there to Soho Square, where his office was. So having established that he did follow this routine, that he was a man of routine, we then staked out, in detective parlance, the office and arrived there fairly early in the morning. It seemed that he'd actually got there before us, or had managed to get in without us seeing him. So the first confirmation, as it were, that we had that Nirav Modi was in the building was looking up to the first floor of this beautiful Georgian townhouse where he had his office, looking up to the first floor and seeing him there in the window. And so it was then just a question of waiting until he came out. And so my colleague, Robert Mendick, was positioned actually in Soho Square, in the small park in Soho Square, and was able to look up at the window and was able to then sort of signal me that it seemed that Modi was indeed leaving. I was standing beside the door, the front door to this building. And then Nirav Modi stepped out onto the pavement, and he stepped out and turned and walked past me. And so I fell into step behind him, and I had a videographer working with me. So the two of us followed him for a few steps up Soho Street. And then basically I just said to him, "Good morning, Mr. Modi." And he turned round and looked rather startled to see me, a complete stranger, greeting him in this way. And I then explained that I was from the Daily Telegraph, and I'd like to ask him some questions. He looked very shocked, I have to say. He looked like a man who'd been shot by a sniper from an adjoining building. He looked very, very unsettled by this, but quickly composed himself and said no comment. And I continued to try and ask him questions, and he again said no comment. Then he turned on his heel and continued walking up Soho Street onto Oxford Street. Now, I should explain for viewers that Oxford Street at that time of the day is very, very crowded, very, very busy. And he got to Oxford Street, crossed over Oxford Street, and then stood on the other side of Oxford Street, apparently waiting for a taxi. I was still beside him at this point, asking him questions, and he was still saying no comment, no comment. Mm-hmm. Now, I thought this was very odd, because the logical thing would have been for him to actually just walk away and to continue walking away, at least somewhere quieter, somewhere less public. But no, he stood there waiting for a taxi. And I explained to him that it's a very busy time. You're not going to find a taxi on Oxford Street. So we then had this rather surrealistic sort of impasse where he was standing waiting for a taxi. I was standing there asking him the same questions over and over and over again. At one point, I actually offered to help him get a taxi in a rather sort of playful way. But finally, a taxi came along, and he was able to apprehend the taxi, to stop the taxi, get into the taxi. And as soon as he got into the taxi, you could see he was reaching for his mobile phone. He was actually onto his phone very, very quickly, I guess to his lawyer or maybe to his office or whomever. The most exciting thing was actually being able to establish where he did live, and through trailing him, through watching him, being able to establish that it was indeed Nirav Modi, that this was the man that we were looking for. Because of course his appearance had changed a little since then. He'd put on weight, And when we did finally corner him, he was there wearing this extraordinary sort of ostrich skin jacket. We realized that it was a big story, and clearly we knew that he was India's most wanted man. But I think certainly I was taken aback by the reaction to this, and the fact that the story was, leading in every Indian news bulletin on the morning afterwards. In a very, very long career which I've had, I've never been involved in anything quite as sort of quite as extraordinary as that, I don't think.